In this video, we're going to be talking about what exercises we can do for insertional Achilles tendinopathy, and we're going to be using a very recent 2025 research paper to illustrate this. I'm Ali, I'm one of the physios from treatmyachilles.com. If you would like to find out anything about our service, which treats all things Achilles related, please have a look in the link below, and it's the same link that will help you book an appointment. So in this video, we're going to be looking at what sorts of exercises are good for an insertional Achilles tendinopathy, and this will have lots of links to previous videos we've done discussing what is an insertional Achilles and what's the best sorts of treatments and things you can do. If you would like to find out more information about that, please have a look in all the links in the description below. So what is an insertional Achilles tendinopathy? Well, an Achilles tendinopathy typically can be found in three areas. One that's not so common is higher up near where it attaches to the calf. Then we've got a mid-portion Achilles, which is found right in the middle. And then we've got an insertional Achilles tendinopathy, which can be found right where that Achilles attaches into the back of the heel at the base. That insertional Achilles tendinopathy can differ in how we manage it. So why it differs, it depends on a type of force called a compression force. So when we are using our tendons, we have different forces that go through them. Firstly, the one that we do when we contract it to push off and move. And secondly, a force that would bring that tendon closer to where it attaches to that bone, like when we stretch it, for example. So compression is if we were in an Achilles example to go into more of a dorsiflex position, so more where our foot and toes pull back towards us. If we go more into that dorsiflex position, where our Achilles attaches to the back, gets closer to the bone. So if we have been diagnosed with an insertional Achilles tendinopathy, that area might be a bit irritated and sore. So if it gets closer to that bone, it's a bit like pressing on a bruise and expecting it to go away. So the main difference between exercises for an insertional Achilles and also for a mid-portion Achilles tendinopathy or higher would be that we would decrease some of those compression forces whilst things calm down. And once they're calm, we would then bring those compression forces back in. So some of the things we would ask people to do is not to stretch their calves with insertional Achilles issues. So any of the typical calf stretches, which I'll show you in a moment. And we'd also ask you to not do things where there is repetitive dorsiflexion movements. Now, those dorsiflexion movement is really normal, it's really common. Please don't be afraid to do that movement. We're talking about repetitive dorsiflexion movements. So for example, dropping off a step, going into warrior type positions in yoga or downward dogs, or something where we might be in plank positions or press up positions for long periods of time, or sustained stretching. So we do have some information on what you could do to try and help reduce those in these circumstances, and those links to those videos will be below. So the types of Achilles stretches we're saying please can you avoid at the moment would be something like a runner's stretch. So you could see my back foot is in more dorsiflexion. So dorsiflexion, again, my toes are coming closer and up. So dorsiflexion is this movement, plantarflexion is this movement. So we're coming, this is the sort of thing that could irritate, or any of those other calf stretches that you may have seen with both knees straight, or indeed calf stretches where we're coming up on the wall. So instead of calf stretches, is foam roll or self-massage the back of that calf, and you could use any sorts of massage equipment, but you would stay away from the tendon itself, because again, massaging to that tendon itself is a bit like pressing on the bruise and expecting it to go. Other things that can help reduce that dorsiflexion angle, or that angle where we're coming into more compression, is wearing footwear with slightly higher heel to toe drop. These sorts of things could be found in trainers or sneakers, or the same thing if you get by some heel wedges or heel cups. They can sit in the back of that heel and increase the angle of heel to toe. When we first have an Achilles tendinopathy, particularly insertionally, it might be really acute, really tender, really uncomfortable, and it might be that we're wearing that sort of footwear in and around the house on a regular basis, and it also might be something that you would start to do these exercises in, and over time we would start to reduce, take away those wedges, go back to your normal footwear, and you'd be able to start wearing a variety of different things. We do have videos on heel wedges and also on different footwears that we would tell you the information about, both for running and for normal life. So the best evidence base to treat Achilles tendinopathy, regardless of where they're found, are strengthening exercises. And again, we have videos describing why that is the best treatment. Please see that link below. If we're looking at strengthening programs, they need to be a few different rules around them, so they need to follow these rules. Our first rule is that it needs to be comfortable during that moment that you're doing the exercise, and also remain comfortable for at least the next 24 hours. Because sometimes with Achilles problems, we don't feel the pain in the moment, we feel it as a later on response. And that might not just be pain, that might also be stiffness feelings. So for example, I've sat down for a while, got up, started to walk and move, and it feels a bit stiff and sore. Or first thing the next morning when I've got out of bed and started to walk for that day. So we're looking at those symptoms not increasing as well with those exercises. The amount of pain that is comfortable and acceptable for me is a 0 to 2 out of 10, which I call a niggle. So a small amount of pain that means for the rest of the day you could continue with whatever plans you have. You're not limping more than you would be, and you can ignore it and talk to a friend if you're resting and sitting. One of the research papers we're now going to talk about came out earlier this year in 2025. It was done by a group called Pringles et al, and they looked into should we reduce that dorsiflexion in our exercises for Achilles tendinopathy or insertional Achilles tendinopathy. And it was found that the group that had reduced the dorsiflexion and brought it back in over time did better than the group that did the traditional Achilles tendinopathy exercises. You may well have seen in other videos and videos online where people tend to drop their heel off a step. So they had two different groups that they split into, and there was 42 people that were of an active sporty background but not elite sports. In the two groups they were given the advice and information very similar to what we're talking about now, or in the other group they were just given general tendon advice and not talked about the dropping into dorsiflexion or compression. They were told to stretch in one group. They were also told to not stretch and do the massage that we just spoke about in this group without the dorsiflexion. The difference with the exercises is this group did go into dorsiflexion, so it went off a step, and it did other exercises which I'm going to demonstrate in a moment. And then this group, they kept it on the flat floor, so there was no dorsiflexion in that at all. And again, we'll demonstrate that now. Typical Achilles tendinopathy exercises may be on a step and end up dropping off. And that dropping off angle is pushing into that dorsiflexion angle that we're trying to avoid. This can be done on 2 feet. It could be done on 1 foot. It could be done going up on 2, swapping over and dropping down. When we're looking at exercises for insertional Achilles tendinopathy, they were done in this study from the flat floor. So these are the sorts of things that I would suggest that you try. So from that flat floor, a good level to start, it would be just to raise. It doesn't matter how high, how low. You might be wearing your footwear with the heel wedges in, and you're just finding a comfortable height and holding. You can then start to build up how long you would hold that for, and you could do that for multiple times. So an example could be a good way to start with 10 times 10 seconds. If you can do 10 times 10 seconds, or you've started to do that a few times in a day, or again, you've started to build up the number of seconds with that, and that can be guided by a professional, you might either start to hold weight, so you might have a weight in your hand, or you start to take more weight onto one leg and do that onto one side as a progression. Sometimes starting with a hold can be uncomfortable. It suits some people, it doesn't suit others. So again, your exercise is from the flat floor. I've got a straight knee, I'm coming up for 3 seconds, and I'm going down for 3 seconds. Again, I could have my footwear on with my heel wedges and raises in, and I'm looking for how many can I do in that comfortable range. If this is starting to become easy, again, I could hold a weight. So I could pick a weight up and hold it in one hand, part way through, I swap to my other hand, or I could put a backpack on my back with that weight inside and have my hands free for balance. Alternatively, you can progress to doing that on the single leg. Again, flat floor with footwear on to start. And these were the exercises that were done in the Pringle et al. Study we were talking about. And again, you can increase that by adding weight into your hand and building up the weights that you're doing. The Pringle et al. Study also went through that same process. So can we do the isometrics first, the hold and the contraction, then we move on to movement-based exercises and we start to build up the strength. After that, we would start to get to a point where it was more comfortable and we may start to bring in either dropping off the step, stretching-based movements, or more exercises like we spoke about earlier that you tend to do in your normal life, which might be your planks, yoga, press-ups, lunges, something that involves that dorsiflexion side to it. And we know to do that when things have calmed down. One of the ways we know how to progress is not just, is it comfortable in the moment and okay for the next 24 hours? It's also about doing this on a consistent and frequent basis. So you'd want to be giving it a go for a few weeks to know that you can build up the weight or the amount of repetitions that you're doing. And you would ask yourself the question, compared to last week to this week, are my symptoms the same or improving? Or is my function, the amount of things I can do day to day, is that the same or improving? And if the answer is yes to those, you know you can push this and you can move this on. In the Pringles et al. Study, they looked at assessing this group at 12 weeks and 24 weeks. We know with Achilles tendinopathies, particularly with insertional ones, they can be quite tricky. They can get irritated quite easily. They might not. Some people don't. Some people do. But we do know that it takes a good period of time to build that strength up to allow you to be able to do things. So it's consistency and frequency. Once you've got to that point, you might be able to start to bring in more exciting exercises, for want of a better term, that replicate more like the sports and activities you want to get back to. Jumping, bouncing, hopping, side-to-side movements, and that would depend on you and what your goals are. We tend to look at two different muscle groups that create the Achilles tendon. There are two different calf muscles. One is your gastrocnemius, which runs from the back of the knee all the way down, and the other the soleus, which starts under the knee, both of which turn into the Achilles tendon. So if we have a straight knee exercise, it tends to bias more the gastrocnemius. A bent knee exercise tends to bias more the soleus, or that they both do activate with both exercises. So some of the typical Achilles exercises for a bent knee that you might see, again, if you look at videos online, include a little bit of that dorsiflexion position. And again, I'll demonstrate that in a minute, which can look quite aggravating. If we're looking at trying to reduce that dorsiflexion, you might find doing bent knee exercises in sitting or using gym machinery where your feet are flat on a plate or on the floor is quite a good idea. So an example of an exercise that doesn't have any dorsiflexion in it but is bent knee can be sitting in a chair or seated in a chair. This will be where your knee is directly above or slightly behind your ankle. So we're avoiding that dorsiflexion position, for example, when we tuck our feet underneath us or have them closer to us. So we're in that position. And again, you would do your repetitions. You could do double leg. Doesn't really matter if you do double or single in a seated position because our weight is spread. If that's easy, you start to add weight piled up on your knee. This could be in a bag, or it could be a weight plate, or it could be a barbell. That's absolutely fine. The example of a typical Achilles that you may have seen that would aggravate this is a bent knee exercise in standing. So in this position, my hips and knees are slightly bent, which you again can see I'm in a dorsiflex position. Again, could be comfortable in some people, but not be in others. And you go up onto your tiptoes and come back down. And again, you could do that on a double leg or on a single leg. So if that is a good option, if this doesn't irritate you, if we're trying to avoid that dorsiflexion position, a seated is an excellent option. So in summary, for our insertional Achilles tendinopathy, we want to do a consistent and frequent strengthening program over a number of weeks, looking at our symptoms in the moment and for 24 hours and comparing them week to week. That program, as proven by that recent research article, has been shown that reducing that compression, so reducing the amount of dorsiflexion, can be beneficial for an Achilles insertional area, as in it reduces some of the symptoms and irritation. So therefore, doing things where you might be doing isometrics, where you're just lifting and holding, where you're doing calf raises flat from the floor, you might be doing a bent leg option seated in a chair, and you progress over time, making this more difficult. What reps, what sets, and where you might start is all very individual. How you respond to this will be very individual, and how you progress those reps and sets over time is also different. So the suggestion would be to gain more advice on this and make it tailor-made for you. It would be to see an individual who can assess where you are, what's going on with that Achilles, and make that program over time and know when to bring in those other more bouncy, interesting back to sport types of activities.